Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Joining me now is Ian Murphy, someone I've wanted to talk to for a long time, and I'm finally getting the opportunity to talk to him without any media narratives whatsoever. The owner of the Iron Pig Smokehouse in Gaylord. Glad to see you.
Thanks for having me, Dave. I appreciate taking the time out today. Thank you.
I appreciate the well on this holiday weekend. Let me start real quick, and then we'll go back. But you just got a win, another win in the courts, and I've seen it in the newspaper, but the media doesn't put out there as much as they did when the state was coming down on you. So, first of all, what's the most recent victory that you've got?
So, thank you for asking. It's a great question. The win, if you will, it really can't be attributed to us, but it is a win for our cause, our lawsuits, and the entirety of us challenging the health law. So, another company, a catering company called Rivercrest Catering, out of I believe Macomb County, challenged the health law 333.2253, as we did. A little bit later on, April 2021, I think is when they did. But they filed in the Court of Claims a declaratory action versus our action came from a direct result of a cease and desist order from the Health Department, Michigan Department of Agriculture, MIOSHA, the Liquor Commission. So we had actual fines and damages versus, unfortunately, this catering company went out of business. And that was contentious part of this lawsuit was these guys were out of business. Should this court case even be here because the mandates have been rescinded and this company is no longer in business? Fortunately, the courts are smart enough to realize that it does matter. This is a big deal. And ultimately, what they did was they overturned the Court of Appeals on appeal. T&V appealed the lower court ruling, and 2 of 3 judges smartly recognized that there is a case of controversy here. It could happen again. Just because the health department rescinded mandates doesn't mean anything. But ultimately, what they agreed with Judge Hunter in our case in Otsego County in the district court was that it was an improper delegation from the legislative branch to the executive branch. The health department is an executive branch agency. They took 2253, basically created their own laws and shut businesses down, as everybody is well aware, in 2020 and 2021. So the win upholds, if you will. It's now a published ruling. So in the legal world, that's a big deal. Our ruling, Judge Hunter's ruling, was never published because the health department gave up their appeal because they had a win over in the Court of Claims. So they said, why do we want to challenge this? We got the W over here in this division, if you will. So we're going to give up this guy's case over here. Well, it backfired. So now what's going to happen, and my understanding is the health department has come out and said that they are going to appeal the Court of Appeals ruling up to the Michigan Supreme Court. So what we're now doing is we're going to be requesting once again that our case be reconsidered, even though they dropped the appeal, and bind it with T&V, because Judge Hunter's ruling is phenomenal. It's built on a Supreme Court case from October 2020 in recertified questions, which knocks down the executive orders from the first part. And then came the health department. So we're back to square one, and it's unconstitutional again.
And this came for people who don't remember, but the Mackinac Center was involved, and the
Yes, yeah.
Supreme Court ruled that Governor Whitmer's executive orders were null and void. And then all of us thought for a brief moment, hey, we're free. But then she turned around and used the health department, correct?
So what's interesting to note, and we actually had to go back and look from the very, very beginning, they were using 2253. But the weight of the executive branch really was held in the police powers, and there were more police powers in the EPGA. So that's why they went with that, curbed it with the health law, which is now unconstitutional as well. And they used the Emergency Management Act, which for all intents and purposes is what they should have been using from the beginning, because what it requires the executive branch to do is go back after 28 days to the legislature to reauthorize another 28 days. You have to have public hearings. Our elected representatives get involved.
Exactly, and for instance, if there's a tornado or a terror attack, the governor can issue a state of emergency, but it's not meant to go on for a year.
Yeah, the way I equate it to folks up here in northern Michigan is so when we have a really terrible snowstorm
Yeah.
and the police come out and the county comes out and said there is a stay off the road warning. That is a local use of the Emergency Management Act,
Yeah.
saying, listen, you can get a ticket if you're out during this terrible, terrible storm. That is exactly what it is. The only thing is, you only have 28 days to use that. Then you have to go get permission for another 28 days, which is how she should have been doing it. And she was in violation of that in the 2020 certified questions. Um, so now the health department law is now also unconstitutional, even though they're going to try and challenge it. But they're up against their own ruling from 2020. So it's going to be very, very difficult for the Supremes to overturn themselves.
Let me go back, and I know it's a holiday weekend, so I'll try to be quick. But March of or May of 20, when did all the was it May of 2020 when the gauntlet came down with the orders closing the restaurants? Was that May or March?
It was March.
March of 2020. So it felt like, I remember, the world was ending. People were lined up at grocery stores and so forth, and the schools were closing, the restaurants were closing, and a lot of people just did what they were told. You didn't. You actually had some critical thinking going on. What was going through your head at that moment?
Well, I'll tell you in fairness, for the first part of the shutdowns, the March portion that you're talking about, we did shut down. We
Okay.
did take out only.
Okay.
Um, we did the right thing, if you will, because it was so new. We did not know. I
Yeah,
thought it
nobody
was
knew what was.
nobody really knew. And they weren't telling us everything as we now know. But I did find it a little bit interesting that this was such a communicable disease that was spreading so fastly, but yet the best thing we can do is wash our hands, uh, don't pick our noses, don't put your fingers in your eyes, sneeze into your elbow, and stay 6 feet away, which I'm sure are all wonderful things. But to curb such a pandemic, an epidemic, it seemed like this is all we're doing. Why aren't we doing those things in the first, especially in restaurants? Washing hands is kind of a big deal. So I knew that something was a little bit off, but it was unprecedented times. And we said, okay, we're going to do the right thing. We don't want to put anybody in danger. And we got through it, thankfully, by the skin of our teeth. And then
Yeah.
we opened back up. We had a nice summer, but really we started seeing customer behavior starting to change and people starting to get mean and nasty and seeing customers or employees without masks and not knowing, if they could or couldn't wear a mask. People started leaving nasty reviews that had never even eaten in the restaurant. So the tide started changing kind of June, July as we kind of got to open back up. And
Okay.
then come the fall, really when things changed was when they started requiring our customers to sign in.
Yeah.
When you had to do more to come in and eat at a
Mhm.
restaurant than was required for you to go into a hospital. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I frequent the hospital with regular visits. At that time, they never once required me to sign in. I walked in, they handed me a mask if I did not have one. They pointed to a sheet and said, "Do you have any of these symptoms?" They may have checked my temperature once, but that was it. But to come into the Iron Pig, time of arrival, I need your name, your last name, your contact information, all of that stuff.
That's, I think, when the public, I felt things turned a little bit. People were like, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, we're open, we're closed, we're open, we're closed, then there's curfews. And then, you know, the feedback that I was getting was how does it make sense to be at a Walmart or to be outside at a protest or a gathering, but I still have to wear a mask even though I'm out. I'm also in the golf business. Some of the things that we saw in the golf business: one person to a cart, don't touch the flags, no ball washers. I mean, just crazy things. Of course, hindsight is 2020, but
True.
it just always seemed that there was something that was just a little bit off and it should have been handled a different way.
Was that right before, and then she shut them down again, or shut you down? Was it right before Thanksgiving, or was it around at that time? That time?
Yeah, so it was about a week to a week and a half before Thanksgiving,
Yeah,
when they completely shut down again. So
yeah,
October was the sign-in sheets, some limited capacities, and then it went to strictly takeout again as the COVID numbers started to rise again, coming into the winter season, if you will, whatever they were claiming it was at that point.
yeah.
Um, and actually that first week and a half, we stayed closed again. Um, Hoping that our government would come through with an unemployment special aid package, something for our employees going into the holiday season, saying, listen, we understand, da 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 da. I will say I didn't take the first round of PPP.
Oh,
Um, when they were first offering it, the terms weren't really complete. They said, "Hey, we have access to all this money, but we're not really sure how the repayment is going to work. But hey, here's all this money."
not good.
And I'm not a real big bailout fan. Some of the stuff that went down in 2008, I think as a free market person, I kind of think that the insurance industry getting a bailout, the bankers getting a bailout, some of our automotive getting a bailout.
Yep.
I wasn't a fan. I did end up taking some second round after the government shut us down for 90 days. But going into that fall, it was like, listen, we can't do this. Stayed closed for a week. I got hammered on social media for simply asking the question, do you feel comfortable, given the circumstances, still eating out in public? And I even said, this is not an indication that we're going to open. We're not going to open, but we're in unprecedented times. And we have this audience in front of us. We want to know, how do you feel about your personal safety? Would you still dine out? And people were so mad at me for that. And what was interesting is about a week later, I called the health department the day before Thanksgiving, one of the biggest bar nights of the year. The night before, I called up Holly, our local health official, and said, listen, you're kind of painting us in a corner,
Yeah.
and this is what I may have to do. We're probably going to open up tomorrow. We're going out of business. I've got people to feed, paychecks that got it, bills to pay. Insurance doesn't stop. Utilities don't stop. They don't care. They
Yep.
absolutely don't care.
Yeah.
So I gave them a heads up, and it turns out they took that heads up and showed up at 11:30, a half hour after we opened the next morning, with a cease and desist order for me to shut down immediately. So,
And you didn't. Again, you didn't.
And I didn't. I had had enough. I had the backing of our crew, my wife, my family, my sister's an ER doctor here in Gaylord.
Wow.
And if there were ever a time that she thought that I was doing something wrong, she probably would have slapped the crap out of me.
Your wife?
My wife too. My sister is the ER doctor. Yes.
Oh, your sister. Okay. The wife's,
ER doctor, yeah.
wife's always in charge. That's what I think.
Wife is definitely in charge. Yes.
Yeah. So, and because there had been businesses that already at that point, hundreds probably or more, that had went out of business. And you probably know a lot of business owners, or that were business owners, who now they lost their business probably by that point even.
Absolutely, I do. Unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said you had a lot of support, a lot of negative, but you had to have had a lot of support in the community, I would assume, or did that support grow?
Well, so my first question would be, define community. Our physical local community. There's a little bit of a difference. We did have some local community members that were not happy with the Iron Pig. Some of our neighbors, even here downtown, were upset that they thought that we were stealing business, which is their interpretation. I simply said everybody has the choice to do so. You just have to understand that there's going to be $1,000 a day fine. And one of the restaurants across the street from us did open up for one day, and they came in and gave her a cease and desist, and she closed right up. So there was a little bit of negativity, but by and large, it was overwhelmingly good support, great support. The
Yes.
reason why the Iron Pig is still here and doing a festival again this weekend today is because of those customers that dared to come out and say, we're going to drive 3.5 hours. We're going to drive 6 hours. We're going to come from Calumet. We're going to come
Wow.
from all over the place to support these people because they've decided to take a stance. And those are the folks that have kept us going, kept the lights on, kept cash in our employees' pockets, not a damn PPP loan, not anybody that's getting on social media lambasting me, or if we show a picture of the restaurant, there was an employee without a mask on or something like that. They're not coming here. They're not going to come here. So if anything, all we did was simply filter out those people that were probably just going to be mean or rude anyway.
And because of that, I have people downstate. I grew up in Metro Detroit. They know about you and they make it a habit now when they go up there to go to your place because of that.
Yeah, it was definitely a risk to, I guess, take sides, if you will, and especially in the political environment. I've been labeled as a Trumper, Republican, all these crazy things. And I'm not. I'm independent. I'm a libertarian. So I kind of get to pick on both sides a little bit, if you will.
Just like me. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating time that we live in, given independent content creators like yourself. We have started to do the same thing because we want our side of the narrative to get out. We're in the middle of producing a documentary about the whole thing. What's crazy is we can't finish it.
Yeah,
Right?
it's
I mean,
ongoing.
we just yesterday or the day before now, we got more information that is, plays into what we have going on. So it's just this ongoing storyline, if you will. And we haven't even discussed the use of the local. There's a 2241 or something that was also used. So here in Otsego, 2451. Here in Otsego County, a health director, local health director, took it upon herself to put masks on the students in August of 2021. Now there is a lawsuit called "Let Them Breathe" versus I think it's the health department of Northwest Michigan that went to Court of Appeals, and they're actually, so my attorney represents them as well. This case was born out of a meeting that we had here at the Iron Pig the weekend that these mask mandates right before school was started, 3 days before school started.
Yep.
So this lawsuit, Court of Appeals decision with T&V has wide-ranging implications, not just for the Iron Pig as another win for us as a published case, but for these ancillary cases. There's one in Alpena involving Myosha. Myosha came in under the health law, and they're using part of, so ultimately at the end of the day, what we want and our legal team would like is a redefinition of how the legislature writes these laws.
Yep.
And they have to look at how much power they're giving executive agencies like the Liquor Commission, Myosha. I mean, there's a building agency that tried to have their licenses pulled early March because there was too many people on a job site outdoors. I mean, it's insane.
I remember working in the newsroom, and Myosha, the Liquor Commission, they would send news releases every day bragging about how they were fining businesses. We are standing up for safety, and they would send the news releases almost every day, and we would air them. But I would always call up those businesses, talk to the owners, and it turns out there's a lot of information and details, obviously, that wasn't in those news releases. So that's why I think the media also, and I'll call my profession out. I think they failed a lot of the public because they were going by the news releases or what the state said, but there was always another side to a story, and I don't think that was getting out as much as it should have been during those years.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is, the narrative of peer pressure. When I'm talking about, there's people that were upset with me. They didn't fully understand exactly what we were standing up for. But when the narrative is out there that, you should do the right thing for your community, it makes it very easy for people to virtue signal, I'm doing the right thing. I have my mask on. I did this. I did that. Why aren't you? Why are you keeping your restaurant in the middle of a COVID hotbed in Otsego County? You're killing people. How can you do? I'm not kidding you, Dave. Yesterday, somebody on social media said, I killed someone by keeping my restaurant open.
You're still getting it.
I cannot believe it. This is actually the first time that anybody has even said that on social media. I mean, they've said all kinds of, I've had death threats. I was threatened with jail time for keeping the restaurant open.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff has all been at bay on social media. We've contacted the police over a couple of things, but nothing major. I got doxxed on Thanksgiving. My address was published, but it's all part of that peer pressure handed down through media, through the executive agencies. You need to fall in line. If you don't, look what I'm going to do to the construction company. I'm going to take the Iron Pig's liquor license. They came out with a list weekly of liquor licenses throughout the state that had been suspended.
Yep.
I mean, part of what we did was I followed a couple of restaurants from Southern Michigan that were about a week and a half ahead of us with their liquor license stuff. So I knew a little bit what the commission was going to try and do. Now, I took it one step further and never once complied until they tried to arrest me. And again, it's hard. Marlena can tell you this. It's hard to run a restaurant when you're in jail.
Yeah.
And that was the ultimate decision that my attorney and I made when I got an email from the judge's clerk in Ingham County that said, hey, by the way, we do have the right to jail Mr. Murphy.
Wow.
And we said, well, okay. It's counterintuitive at this point to keep money in my employees' pockets and the lights on if I'm in jail.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
yeah.
I would hope now in this 4th of July weekend of Independence 2023, I think the tide has hopefully turned. I think the average person maybe before who wasn't very informed, I think they look back and they're like, okay, that was a mistake. There's some, like you said, who just emailed you or messaged you who are always going to think no matter what they're going to think. And that's probably political. But I hope people learn their lesson looking back on things. I mean, what do you think? Should this serve as a lesson of what not to do next time we have something like this? Or hopefully we never do again, but there will be a pandemic again. But as to how it was handled?
Absolutely. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that is what we're fighting for, is to make sure that these things are done in the proper way so that unelected officials, whether it's a local health department director, whether it's a police chief or a state health director, they're unelected. Those are all appointed people. They're responsible to nobody but the person that appoints them. At the end of the day, what the founding fathers had intended was to have elected representatives representing the voters' will. And the Emergency Management Act enforces that. You only get to do stuff in 28-day tranches. And then if we don't like what Representative so-and-so is doing, we're going to get rid of he or she. That's how they intended it. Versus what we have now is you see Bob Gordon's gone. He got a golden parachute.
Oh, yeah.
Liz Hertel, she's sitting in there now. We're going to see what's going to happen because she's actually named in this T&V lawsuit as well. There is a class action that we're sitting on right now that we've taken over 60 restaurants included in this class action. We have, it's been a furious weekend besides the festival going on.
Yeah.
We have litigation that we have prepared, but now with this new published ruling, it changes a few things. So we're actually going to be adding some other stuff in, and then we may end up going to the Court of Claims for a couple of other things, but none of it is really for money. The class action is what will be for money. This will bolster that. Not money for me, hopefully money for the people that have lost their businesses, their livelihoods, the T&V Rivercrest catering companies. My friend Amy Heikkinen up in the UP in Calumet, Cafe Rosetta,
Yes.
She was fined over $15,000 by a judge down in Lansing somewhere, and she got yelled at. I mean, these people are so out of control, and you can see it in the dissenting opinion of this T&V ruling the other day, this one judge, Chris Yates, you can see his political ideology written in the first paragraph. Why are we still doing this? Oh, these cases and these attorneys, they're just basically zealots. Like, why are we still? You're like, oh, we're still doing this COVID thing. Oh, it's over. The mandates are gone. It's not an emergency anymore. That's the entire point.
Yeah. Last thing. A couple weeks ago, I posted in my Facebook memories. It came up a picture. It's actually a couple months ago of when the paint sections were locked off at Lowe's or Home
Yes.
Depot, and I posted it. I said we must never forget. And some people went off on me saying, "Why are you bringing up the past? Why are you bringing up the past?" I think, in me talking to you, I think we need to continue to bring this up because people have very short memories, especially when it comes to the ballot box and voting. You know, I was somewhat surprised. It seems like when Governor Whitmer was reelected, maybe some people forgot what happened. People have very short attention spans, it seems like.
That's 100% true. We get off on a tangent about the last election and why Whitmer was reelected, but I think you're 100% right. People do forget. And there's an old saying, and I forget who said it, but those that don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. And I think that, you know, this is the lesson that we have to learn in Michigan and federally as well. You see some SCOTUS rulings that are coming out that are, you know, kind of really sticking to the Constitution and states' rights and some of these other issues, EPA rulings, especially that we've been watching at the federal level saying, listen, these executive branch agencies are so bloated and are so big. This is what's happening, and they're taking over, and it's crushing everybody's liberties. And Neil Gorsuch, Supreme Court Justice, said it brilliantly in, of course, a case from Arizona. He said, you know, this time that we've lived through is one of the greatest intrusions on civil liberties that we've lived through in recent memory. And we need to litigate these things. We've got to get these things figured out for future generations so they don't happen again. Because another old saying is when that link on the chain gets shortened one link at a time. And that's sort of what has happened. And maybe in the recent years, it has been shortened quite a bit. But you're right. Short memories could be just as deadly.
Well, I thank you for taking the time, especially on this 4th of July Independence. People forget about what it really means. And I hope everyone can listen to this, and you're going to have to keep me updated. And next time I head that way up north, I go through Gaylord a lot. I will stop in for some nice barbecue.
You got it, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm always happy to take a few minutes of time. I'm in a nice air conditioned area. We're going to go out and have a party here out in the 85-degree weather for this evening. Have a good time, celebrate freedom, celebrate due process. That's what this whole thing is about. We were able to go through administrative court and get all of these things done. And it's amazing to see some people get upset at people that want to challenge authority and challenge the government. And that's simply all that we're doing. And it's been done for generations. And this is just our fight that we've taken on, and we're happy to keep doing it.